Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, August the 19th, 2024. Now, I would guess that today there is more astrological activity than any other day for a very long time in some respects. It is really, really hectic. There's just everything going on. And of course we have a full moon, and this full moon is square Uranus, and we've got other things happening. And so in this video I really need to talk about this full moon because it is so dramatic and we've got so many other things going on in the background. And this does raise the question about whether astrology works. You would have expected, with so much activity, that something really would happen. But it's so anticipated, isn't it? You look all over YouTube, around the internet, people are really, really excited about this full moon. And of course it happens on the first day of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. So there's even more anticipation. So when you've got all this activity, you almost expect that nothing's going to happen. That's the way it goes, isn't it? You get really excited and everyone's primed and nothing happens. I'm not saying nothing's going to happen. I'm just trying to look at it from perhaps a slightly skeptical perspective. But in theory, we would certainly expect this full moon and everything else going on around the time of this full moon to mean something. And so in this video, I'm going to be considering the possible impacts of this full moon, remembering that it's not just a one-day wonder. A full moon's impact does last for certainly a couple of weeks, maybe up to 4 weeks, through until maybe the next full moon, certainly until the next new moon. So it may say something about the next 2 weeks, sort of late August, very early September. So that is something we do need to consider. But before I look at this full moon and the surrounding events, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, August the 19th, 2024. Now, before I start, just a reminder that I would really like it if you were to like this video, and I would very much appreciate it if you're not subscribed. If you were to subscribe, it doesn't cost you anything, but it does make a big difference to my channel. Okay, so the first thing we need to look at is the positions of the planets today. Top right, there is a full moon, obviously, and we can see the full moon quite clearly in terms of the chart. We have there's a moon at, well, this is the noon positions, noon in New York. There's a moon at 25 Aquarius, and it's applying to an opposition of the sun at 27 Leo. So for most of the day, the moon is going to be in Aquarius, perhaps all of the day if you're in, I suppose, continental Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand. If you're in America, the moon does go into Pisces late afternoon, early evening, and so that might create a change there, and it might blunt perhaps some of the immediate intensity of the full moon. But the full moon is a time of tension when we are aware of contending forces, two things that don't quite match up with each other. We can see the opposition around us. We can see people who don't get on with each other. We can see ideas that clash. And we, I suppose, realize that we do live in a complicated world. And you will see that Mercury is at 26 degrees 6 Leo. So Mercury is actually very close to the Sun. So this full moon is tied up with Mercury, and Mercury is retrograde. So Mercury is perhaps under a lot of pressure, but Mercury wants to be heard, and so there might be something very verbal about this full moon, aside from the fact that this full moon is square Uranus. Now, I should say, in terms of this full moon, I don't want to talk too much about it in this section of the video. So I'm going to be talking about, the 12 signs very soon. And after I've looked at the 12 signs at the end of the video, I'm just going to be going into the full moon in detail. But we have Mercury tied up with the full moon. And in fact, Mercury is conjunct the Sun today. That is from the Earth's perspective, geocentrically. So Mercury conjunct the Sun, it does, I think, put Mercury under pressure. Now, there is this argument about whether Mercury benefits from being conjunct the Sun, this Cazimi conjunction, because, the theory being that when Mercury is within 17 arc minutes of the Sun, it's somehow is strengthened by the Sun rather than the opposite. But that point of Cazimi is relatively brief, and you can see already by noon New York time the Cazimi, it's no longer Cazimi. I mean, the Sun and Mercury is now over a degree, around a degree away from the Sun, and I wouldn't really worry too much about the Cazimi. I think we basically have to say that the Sun conjunct Mercury is, all things being equal, probably not fortunate, and the Sun Mercury conjunction with the fact that Mercury is retrograde, Mercury's under a lot of pressure now. As I've just said, and it may be difficult for us to think straight. And with Mercury in Leo, some of us might have very high opinions of ourselves, and we might really believe that our ideas are correct, and we might not want to be contradicted. And okay, it might not be us, it might not be someone, it might be someone else. So people are not going to be told, are they? They believe that their view of the world is the best view of the world, that they've got it all sorted out. And maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. And I suppose if you've got anything connected with ideas and politics, tensions could run high. And it's just interesting that today is the day when the Democratic National Convention starts in Chicago. I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, is it really a good idea to start a convention on a day which is so dramatic? And there are other things going on. Venus is opposition Saturn, and that creates a different line of inquiry, Venus opposition Saturn. What does that mean? Well, Venus opposition Saturn puts Venus under pressure. Venus is in Virgo already, we knew that. Venus is it's fallen in Virgo, then it's opposition Saturn, and in fact Venus is it's square Mars as well, but that Venus square Mars, okay, that's exact later in the week, but Venus's position isn't great. So in terms of relating, it may be hard. It may be the transactional nature of Venus in Virgo is emphasized by the fact that Venus is opposition Saturn. People, wanting to do things for money. Everything having a purpose. You can't just do something out of love. It has to be done for a reason. So that could be one aspect of Venus opposition Saturn. And, there is this link, this double link with this Venus-Saturn opposition with prostitution. Venus in Virgo is often connected with prostitution. Venus-Saturn aspects are also connected with prostitution. I mean, I'm not talking about, in this case, necessarily literal prostitution, but there is a tendency to be super transactional with this Venus opposition Saturn. And everything has to have a reason. I mean, perhaps even a material reason. And I suppose when you look at the people around you, always ask, why are they doing what they're doing? What's actually going on in their minds? And I'm afraid one perhaps should be suspicious. People are not necessarily doing things just for love today. There is an underlying purpose. And the financial and material side of things is never going to be very far from the surface. I mean, I suppose you could try to be positive about Venus opposition Saturn. I suppose responsibility in relationships, I suppose you could say. Or I suppose Venus is also connected with money. So Venus opposition Saturn, there are going to be concerns about money, perhaps. Maybe you're not going to be concerned about money, but some people are. And I think that there will be a sense that everything has a price. But then you might say that, people know the price of everything, but the value of nothing. And that might be a manifestation of Venus opposition Saturn. And yes, Venus is not just opposition Saturn, but Venus is square Jupiter. So there is that tension there, isn't there? Venus wants to be with that square Jupiter, might be trying to be a little bit indulgent, but running into Saturn. So, some people might, with this configuration, try to put the best face on things. They might perhaps be overindulgent, spend too much money, and if you spend too much money, then immediately you run into the opposition of Saturn. So it's like making a financial decision or making a decision to spend money and then immediately regretting it. That could be how Venus opposition Saturn might work out, because it's previously made a square to Jupiter. And talking about Jupiter and Saturn, there is a Jupiter-Saturn square today. That's just one other thing, Jupiter-Saturn square. And Jupiter-Saturn square, I already had a video about the Jupiter-Saturn square. It's a key moment potentially in the business cycle and the economic cycle. And that's not to say that anything necessarily is going to happen today, but it's just a reminder that whatever's going on in the economy at this time is kind of in a bit of a crisis. Now, by crisis, I mean it's a kind of a sort of decision moment, isn't it? And I don't know, in the US, people are talking about reducing interest rates in September. I think there's a meeting later in the week in Jackson Hole, some economic meeting that they always have a meeting at Jackson Hole. I think it's out in Wyoming, where they have, I don't know what it is. It's some sort of economic gathering of the knowledgeable and the worthy, and financial journalists pay a lot of attention to it, and they look at what kind of announcements are made. And it's just interesting that's happening at the time of this square with Jupiter and Saturn. And I can go on, but I can't go on and on and on about what's going on astrologically, because at some stage this video has to come to an end. So I'm now just going to look at the heliocentric picture, and I suspect the heliocentric picture compared to the geocentric picture is just going to be a little bit of an anticlimax. So this is the heliocentric picture for today, where you put the sun at the center of the solar system, where it should be. And I just feel that what's happening geocentrically so overwhelms things, but I don't even know if there's much point in looking at the heliocentric picture. You can see that the Earth is conjunct Mercury. That's just telling us what we already know. We know that the Sun is conjunct Mercury, so the Earth is conjunct Mercury as well. And I suppose seeing a Sun conjunct Mercury as an Earth conjunct Mercury puts things in it gives things a slightly different picture. It gives us more of the idea of just needing to talk. There are things we need to communicate about. There are things we need to say. And at the same time, we can feel the restriction, because you can see that there's the Earth conjunct Mercury, but it's semi-sextile Neptune. Mercury semi-sextile Neptune, Earth moving towards a semi-sextile of Neptune. Some of the things we want to say, they just might not come out right. And potentially we might get confused, but that's kind of obvious, isn't it? Because there's just so much going on today that it just might be difficult for us to just know when to start and perhaps know when to stop. So really, there's not much to report, I think, with the heliocentric picture. So it's now time to do my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, August the 19th, 2020, August 19th, 2024. So here goes. These are my forecasts for today, which is Monday, August the 19th. Aries, you just know that it is a busy day. Everything is happening. And at times you might feel that you're in the middle of it. But at the same time, you may not actually be affected by the day's events as much as other people. You can see the drama. You can see the conflicts, and you can see why things could go wrong. Maybe you can also see the opportunities, but it's not necessarily about you personally. And I just think it's very important not to personalize anything. A lot of people are going to say things today or do things which they're not fully in control of. It's perhaps that they are motivated by some wider collective force. And of course, if someone is motivated by a wider collective force, they can, in some respects, be regarded as not responsible for it. I understand everyone is responsible at some level, but when the sort of collective unconscious is so busy, if you see the collective unconscious as being a reflection of what's going on astrologically, or at least perhaps when we look at the planets, we're just seeing a reflection about what is going on in the collective mind of humanity. There is a sense in which people are just motivated by things that really are out of their control. And I think that Aries, there may be times when you are puzzled by other people's behavior. It doesn't entirely make sense. And things are not helped by the fact that Venus is opposition Saturn and Venus is opposition Jupiter. Remember, in the Aries chart, Venus does have a special connection with relationships. It is how people relate. It can also describe partners and people close to you. And so you might find other people's behavior perplexing. They might also be a little bit mean-spirited in certain cases, or just holding something back. and this might bother you. And they might even contradict themselves. So you might find that someone is very enthusiastic one moment, and the next moment they just shut up shop. And under those circumstances, Aries, it's tempting to get annoyed and perhaps to blame someone for being rude or for not treating you properly, being disrespectful. But again, I think it has something to do with, whatever is going on in the collective. And, it's also the case that today, Aries, I think that your social life is something that you would quite like to put energy into. I think other people are important. The moon is in late Aquarius, and so perhaps you might feel that it's a time to engage with friends and associates and whatever, and that might be like what you'd like to do, but the practice of it may not be great. And so if you are interacting with people, particularly with this full moon today, it may be somewhat disappointing at best, or you might have realizations about other people and your social position, and those realizations could be somewhat disturbing. You might find something out that you didn't really want to hear, or you just might have a realization about what someone is like and what kind of role they should be having in your life. And you may kind of, for example, have a realization that someone who you thought was useful is not really as useful as you'd hoped. And it might then be a time when you might want to make some changes in your social life. Perhaps, some people really can't offer much more. They've had their day, and perhaps it's time to move on. And indeed, Aries, you do have to think about what makes you special and how respected you are for being special. And it just might occur to you that just some people don't have sufficient respect for you, in which case you may just suddenly make a connection, and in your mind you will break a connection, I suppose. You make a connection in your mind, and then in terms of how you relate to something outside, you break a connection. You realize that something is absolutely not going anywhere. But to finish, Aries, it is a dramatic day. I don't think you have to personalize everything, and I don't think that you're directly impacted by it in the way that some other people are. So maybe, Aries, it's just a time to watch and just not to get caught up in it. I don't think you have to get caught up in it. So, you can perhaps take it easy, and particularly if you're in the Americas, then late afternoon, early evening, the moon does change sign. It moves from Aquarius into Pisces, and this might be a time when you are able to just disengage, and that's when you can really start watching, and you can perhaps distance yourself from the surrounding maelstrom, and that just might be the best approach. Of course, if you're not in the Americas, then you will have the moon in Aquarius all day long. But even then, just towards the end of the day, you'll just feel that actually the drama is over, and it's just time to reflect. Taurus, you are certainly feeling what is happening today, and I do think that you are being pushed right now by ongoing astrological events, and some of these events are positive and some of these events are negative. And I suppose what you need to do is, if at all possible, you need to focus on the opportunities and what this day should be about. So, as you know, we've got a full moon, and this full moon is square Uranus, and this full moon has a direct impact on your sign. You know, you have got Uranus in Aquarius. The full moon is square Uranus. So you've got moon is in Aquarius. The sun is opposition to moon. So it feels, Taurus, that something has to give, and you perhaps realize you can't be all things to all people, and that you can't focus all your energy into several different places. If you've got all your energy and you're trying to scatter it all, it's really difficult. But at the same time, you've got competing pressures, and in terms of a full moon, on one hand, I think it makes Taurians fairly ambitious. There are things you want to achieve. You're looking at your place in society. You're looking at the extent to which you're able to achieve your ambitions, and at the same time, you're aware of other competing forces. You know, for example, you might have to deal with family members. You might have to deal with your home. You might have to deal with just domestic stuff. But you know, it's important. But it just may feel that you can't be in two places at once. Are you going to be focusing on what you want to do in society, or are you going to be focusing on the pressures of a family? Can you do both? And it might actually feel that you can't do both. So what you have to do is somehow manage the tension. And I suppose one way of managing the tension is by tuning into the power of Uranus, this planet Uranus, which is in Taurus, your sign. And so Uranus is about you as a unique individual. It's not how society sees you. It's not how your family sees you. It's how you see you. And you just have to tune into yourself as a unique human being. And I suppose if you can completely not ignore, but just downplay external pressure, whether the external pressure is from society, perhaps your job, employers, other people that you might have to deal with as you go through life. That's one set of pressures, and you've got your pressures from your domestic environment. But it's not about you. Neither side of this considers you. But if you focus on you, then things are going to be much easier. You'll perhaps realize that there isn't actually a conflict, or at least there isn't a conflict that you can't deal with. If you focus on yourself and your unique individual self at every step of the way, then you'll find a way through, and you may be able to meet all obligations at once, but on your terms. And I think perhaps in the process there might be some sense of dis-ease, not feeling comfortable, not as in disease, as in sickness. There might be a sense of unease. There could be arguments. There could be a confrontation. But if you remain true to yourself, then I think it's going to be fine. It's about you as an individual player who has your own particular perspective. So that's one approach. And that may be enough. That, you know, you've certainly got enough on your plate working out your own individual approach. But while all this is going on, Venus is making a square to Jupiter, and it's making an opposition to Saturn. And of course, Venus has a special relationship to Taurus. And this creates a new set of issues. So with Venus squared Jupiter, there is a tendency perhaps to indulge yourself, to respond to ongoing tensions, perhaps by spending money or consuming in some way. You're feeling you perhaps have, well, it could be consuming food, or it could be just doing something, perhaps because you feel you need some pleasure. But I think if you try to enjoy yourself today, particularly if you're spending money on trying to enjoy yourself, there's going to be a certain feeling of dissatisfaction. Yeah, try too hard to find pleasure, and you're not going to find pleasure at all. And then you've got Venus opposition Saturn, which is quite a difficult aspect. Something is kind of really hitting you, and with this Venus opposition Saturn, it may be perhaps difficult to express yourself emotionally, and you might feel that certain people are just holding you up and are really not being conducive to your general happiness. And so what do? Well, you could pick and choose. You could say, well, some people are hard work, therefore they should be avoided. But if you were to take that approach, then there might be something evasive about it. There just may be some people who actually you do need to get on with, you need to relate to, even if you don't like them, even if you find them hard work. But I suppose the key point is not to be overwhelmed, and to keep in mind your fundamental individuality, which was represented perhaps by that Uranus in your sign. Keep that in mind. Never forget it. And then you can perhaps deal with people, even if these people are trying to restrict your freedom of action. But in terms of one-to-one relationships, I would have said that today may not actually be worth the effort, because I just don't think there is sufficient emotion here. There's not sufficient togetherness. So I mean, you can get on with people at a certain level, but getting on with people at a close emotional level today with Venus opposition Saturn could be very hard work, and it may all seem a bit contrived at best. And so perhaps you just shouldn't bother, and you should just focus on yourself and making sure that you are a powerful, functioning, unique Taurian individual. Gemini, I'm afraid that Mercury, your ruler, is under a lot of pressure at the moment. So Mercury rules Gemini. Mercury is currently going retrograde, which isn't great. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it would be better if it wasn't going retrograde. And Mercury is in Leo. Okay, Mercury might be fairly close to the Regulus, the royal star, and so at the moment there may be a certain capacity to demonstrate who you are and how important you are, and perhaps even to link with maybe important people. So there may be a certain capacity in that direction, but I think it may be a little bit under pressure. And Mercury is moving away from Regulus. Mercury was pretty close to Regulus recently, but it's now moving away. It's moving retrograde away from it. And Mercury is conjunct the Sun. So that means that Mercury is combust. It's too close to the Sun. You just feel that you can't fully express your real self. And so I think you just have to be aware of that situation. I'm not saying that it's the end of the world. It's just you have to be aware of your limitations. It's not going to be so easy to express yourself over the course of the day, and you may just feel that something is being hidden. You've got so much to contribute, but are you actually able to contribute? And if you do try to make an impact, it might be very forced, and at the same time you might get your facts wrong. And don't forget, I am a Gemini. I do have the sun in Gemini. I know some of you watching this have got your ascendant in Gemini, but for myself, I certainly relate to being a Gemini. I have Taurus rising, but I sort of feel myself to be more of a Gemini than a Taurus. It depends how you look at it. But what I'm saying is that I'm not just being a bit downbeat with you. I'm sort of being downbeat with myself. And Mercury is under pressure. I'm feeling a bit downbeat myself, by the way. I'm beginning to feel this. I don't know how I'm coming across, but I'm very aware of this pressure that Mercury is under. And yeah, you might try to do something different, but trying to do something different, perhaps to break a deadlock, it may not work out. That is perhaps the problem you've got today. In order to resolve something, you might be really tempted to take some kind of action, and you kind of know in your gut that it is the wrong action, but you still feel you have to do something, and somehow you have to restrain yourself. I hate to say this, but in many respects I think it could be a bad day. It's not a particularly cheerful or fun day, but you can't have a situation where every day is fun. And it is a fact that that Mercury is under a great deal of pressure, and Mercury is also square Uranus, which I've just said, it's Mercury square Uranus. You're on edge, and there's not much you can do about it short term. So that I know that sounds difficult, but it does pass. And if you're in the Americas, you might actually experience a change late afternoon or early evening. In fact, if you're in the UK, you might experience a change very, very late in the evening, very late, almost sort of just before midnight. But and that is when the moon moves from Aquarius into Pisces, and I think that movement from Aquarius into Pisces for Geminis is probably going to be fortunate. It might not sound fortunate, because you might think, oh, moon is in Aquarius, that's nice, it's an air sign. But for Geminis, I think that moon moving into Pisces may be a relief. It will take some of the pressure away, and it will also break up the full moon, because we've got this full moon, sun in Leo, moon in Aquarius, so the moon moves out of Aquarius, so the pressure starts to ease. And when the moon moves into Pisces, I think you can start to be a little more focused and a little more objective, and perhaps there have been sort of ambitions that you have that you'd sort of put on ice that you hadn't been able to focus on. And yeah, if you're in the Americas late afternoon, this evening, you may be able to start to get some perspective again. And if something has been disrupted, you may be able to sort of put it back on the rails, but in a sort of a low profile kind of way. So Gemini, that's it. I'm sorry not to be more positive, but it is something that is passing. It's not going to last forever, and it's just probably not a day for making decisions. I think it's going to be difficult for you to be objective, and there may be just things going on it's just difficult to manage. And so just avoid making decisions, avoid trying too hard to make things happen and make things work. I mean, that is the temptation, isn't it? Things aren't working well, so you feel you have to make a special effort to make them work. But even then, that's not good enough, and it actually might make things worse. So I suppose I have to sort of say, well, tomorrow, Tuesday, tomorrow is another day. Cancer. There is a full moon today, and this full moon is square Uranus, and I think that as a Cancerian, you are very much affected by the lunar cycle, and a full moon for a Cancer can be a very big event, and you might feel that you're under a certain amount of pressure, that also you're more sensitive than usual. You just pick things up, and you're aware of the way things are going, and perhaps in a way that other people are not. So with this full moon this full moon square Uranus, that's saying something about who you are and what you're feeling. Now, you might feel with moon square Uranus that it's all too much, that it's a very complicated, disruptive world, and perhaps you don't want to be part of it. And that's one approach. But perhaps you need to see it in a different way. It's quite enlightening. You are seeing the full picture, Cancer. And the full picture might be disturbing, Cancer, but you are being exposed to some kind of underlying truth. And if you can see the truth of the matter, then I would have said that does give you a certain advantage. It perhaps allows you to anticipate what is going to happen next. And at the same time, typically Cancerians are very security orientated, and so maybe there are sudden steps you can take in order to give your security a boost. And all the while, Cancer, I think that you're going to be taking things very seriously. You will have a serious approach. You'll understand that you live in a complicated world, and that approach is absolutely appropriate. It fits in with the times in which we are living. And this approach, which seems a little bit complex, and you might just feel in terms of how other people see you that you're not quite being your normal self, but you are being your normal self really, because you are feeling your way around. You are addressing the world and its complexities in a very serious way, and that's what a Cancer should be doing. So don't worry too much about the impression you're giving. Now, if you are a Cancerian in the Americas, then late afternoon, early evening, there could be a change when the moon moves into Pisces. I mean, to be specific, at around 10 to 4 in the afternoon, well, 8 minutes to 4 in the afternoon on the West Coast in Los Angeles and Portland, Oregon, or 8 minutes to 7 in the evening in New York, around that time, so late afternoon, early evening, depending on where you are. The moon does move from Aquarius into Pisces, and I think that movement is going to be quite fortunate. I think you're going to feel pretty good with this movement, because the moon moves from an air sign into a water sign. So when the moon moves into the water sign, into Pisces, firstly, that means that the power of a full moon is starting to break up. And secondly, the moon is moving into Pisces, a sign that has a natural affinity with Cancer, your sign. So in the Americas, this evening you're going to feel, I think, just a whole lot better. You'll be able to get a perspective on what's going on, and there may be a greater sense in which you can sort of relax and tune into something that is just a bit beyond yourself, but in a nice way. Maybe you can sort of get a sense of your spirituality, or you might see opportunities, whereas before you only saw restrictions, and you may start to realize that you've got a lot more choices than at first you had thought. At first you thought you had no choice, that you were completely locked into a particular course of action, but by the end of the day, things are starting to free up. Now, if you're not in the Americas, I mean, don't worry about it, because the moon will move into Pisces at a certain stage. If you're in the UK, the moon moves into Pisces at 8 minutes to midnight on Monday night. If you're in sort of Australia or New Zealand, it'll be late morning. So late morning on Tuesday. So that's nothing much to worry about, and that's perhaps something to look forward to. So I know that this full moon is quite intense, Cancer. I mean, it's intense for all of us, but you are sensitive to the lunation, to the lunar cycle. But I think that it's not going to last forever, and there's no need to feel that. There's no need to feel overwhelmed by it, and you just need to take things seriously until you no longer have to take things seriously. Leo. Sun continues moving through your sign. It's still there. Sun's still in Leo, hasn't gone into Virgo yet, and the moon makes an opposition to the sun, and it makes an opposition to the sun across the main axis of your solar chart. And of course, an opposition between the sun and the moon is a full moon by definition. That's what it is. So with this full moon across the main axis of your chart, square Uranus, there may actually be quite a lot to think about and to take on board. And it's a time when you may be able to see the world for what it is and see people for what they are. And if you've recently been confused by someone, I think the clouds of confusion are starting to part. And there's then the question of, what do you do with the truth? When the truth is staring you in the face, do you ignore it? Or do you take it on board? Because that's the thing. It's not enough to know the truth. It's not enough to know the facts of a matter inside and out. We actually have to be able to act on the facts of a matter. And that can perhaps be the problem. So you're given access to the truth, but then there is this question, what do you do now? And in terms of relationships, I think you can really see people. You can see people in glorious technicolor for all they are. If you want to open your eyes, of course you might be in denial, but it is an opportunity. Just watch people, watch their behavior, listen to what they say. It's all very clear. And then, Leo, you have to decide what you're going to do, what your plan of action is. And you may feel that a change is required, but it's going to be actually quite difficult for Leos to move things on, because this full moon, it is in fixed signs. Moon is in Aquarius, sun is in Leo, and it's all making a square to Uranus in Taurus. So there's a lot of fixity here. So Leo, you may be challenged to deal with ways of viewing the world which are very entrenched. They might be just so entrenched that you just feel that you don't want to change. Or it might just be the change that is not about bending. It's the change that is about breaking. Something snaps. And so I suppose you could say it's nicer, easier if things were to change gradually. But, very often change can never be gradual. It has to be sudden. And perhaps there will be this snap moment today when everything just becomes clear and the picture is right in front of you, and you then feel that you have no choice. You have to act. And it could be very sudden. And there might just be a particular realization, perhaps, about your direction. You perhaps had ideas about your direction that had been imposed upon you, maybe, by other people, or it might have felt that they were being imposed upon you by other people, and you perhaps were feeling that you were going in a direction that wasn't really you, but suddenly you get it. And once you get it, then I suppose you have to do something about it, and you have to take immediate action. And one thing about this full moon, because we've got the Sun opposition Moon, and we've got the Uranus square Sun, square Moon, this full moon is kind of at the top of your chart. It's at the chart. It's not in the sort of the lower signs in your if we set up a chart with Leo on the first house, this full moon is about, if you like, the top. It's top heavy, and there's nothing, for example, in Scorpio, because we've got the fixed signs. We've got Sun in Leo, Moon in Aquarius. We've got Uranus in Taurus. So there is a missing fixed sign, and that missing fixed sign is Scorpio. And there's nothing in Scorpio. I mean, okay, there may be asteroids in Scorpio, but there's nothing in Scorpio. And I know you're a Leo, so you might be thinking, well, so what if there's nothing in Scorpio? Well, what that means is that you have to think about what Scorpio means. Scorpio, from a Leo perspective, is a sign relates to grounding, to anchoring, and there just seems to be a certain lack of anchoring. So if you want to make the most of the energy of this full moon square Uranus, which is really trying to propel you forward, to actually make some very sudden and destabilizing changes, it may be necessary. If you're going to do all that, you've got to make sure that you are properly anchored, and you have to sort of imagine what that anchoring actually means. So perhaps you need to start from a perspective of that empty sign. That empty sign is Scorpio, and so by grounding yourself in that sign Scorpio, which is about taking yourself seriously, it's about having a space which is you and no one else's, and making sure that you've always got somewhere to run to. So if things get too much, you've always got, I don't know, whether it's a cave, however you want to see it, some sort of Scorpio location. But you've got somewhere to fall back to if things get a little bit difficult. Then, you fall back, you recharge your batteries, and then you come back again. And that may be the best approach for dealing with this full moon, especially as this full moon, okay, I'm talking about today, Monday, but full moons do hang around. It could say something about the next fortnight. And so perhaps, Leo, that's what you need to do. You need to just give yourself a fallback position, just in case things get too much. But I don't want to take away from the fact that I think that this full moon square Uranus could be very positive. It actually allows you to confront things holding you back, confront structures that are no longer serving a useful purpose, and to sweep them away, and to do it in quite a dramatic way, but just always making sure that your own security is taken care of. Virgo. When I was talking to Gemini, I was kind of suggesting that it might be a somewhat difficult day, and what I was saying to Gemini was that the problem is that Mercury, Gemini's ruler, is under pressure, and of course Virgo, your ruler is Gemini as well, and so as I was telling Gemini, Mercury is under a lot of pressure, and that is something that you very much have to consider. So Mercury represents you, and I think there are reasons why things might be a little bit difficult today. So you can't expect a nice, simple, uncomplicated day where everything goes smoothly. And I think that you, at the same time, should not take it for granted that you're able to make the right decisions. And this is because you have a conjunction. There's a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury right now. And so Mercury is your ruler, remember, and it's retrograde. And Mercury is square Uranus, and it's conjunct the Sun. It's combust. Yeah, and it's in Leo. Leo is the sign before Virgo, so it's quite an introspective sign. It's a sign that can be about secrets and holding things back, and so you might feel that you understand things, but maybe you don't. And so if you reach conclusions today, I think that you should maybe pinch yourself. Really? Have you reached the right conclusions? It's absolutely possible you've reached the wrong conclusions, or perhaps you've made conclusions based on the wrong assumption. For example, if you are afraid of something, maybe you feel that something is actually worse than it actually is. Now, there is actually scope here, Virgo, for allowing fear to control your decision making. So, I always tell people they've got to be cautious. They must watch out. Don't do anything dangerous. But there is actually a chance that you could be too cautious. Okay, not maybe today specifically, but your general approach with the Sun making a conjunction to Mercury retrograde, could be shying away from something based upon incomplete information. You feel that the worst can happen. You've got all these irrational fears, and they could just dominate your decision making. But I don't think today is necessarily a good time for decision making. If you make decisions today, they may not be perfect, and they may be sort of quite impulsive, but not impulsive in a nice way. You just respond. You feel you've got to respond anyway. You just have to respond, and you just perhaps may respond just too hastily and jump to conclusions, and it may end up that those conclusions are not entirely wise, and then you might start to sort of move, and you might start moving in the wrong direction. So Virgo, try to understand your weaknesses. And I don't want to emphasize that you've got weaknesses, but just understand where you might be vulnerable. And if at all possible, keep an open mind and don't allow yourself to be crowded out, whether it's being crowded out by your own fears, or perhaps by other people's fears, or just by other people's personalities. Some people have big personalities. They like to throw their personalities around, and for you, that just could be quite overwhelming. So caution is required there. And at the same time, we have got an opposition aspect between Venus and Saturn today. We've also got a square between Venus and Jupiter. So this is perhaps how you need to think about today, or part of the way you need to think about today is you've got square between Venus and Jupiter, opposition between Venus and Saturn. Which one are you going to emphasize? I think there's a danger that you emphasize Venus opposition Saturn. So Venus opposition Saturn, Venus, it's you. Well, it could be you to an extent because Venus is in Virgo. That's you trying to be yourself, trying to project yourself in society and project yourself, in terms of other people and how you come over. It's kind of the mask that you're presenting, and it's opposition Saturn, and you could just take the view that it's just not worth it with Venus opposition Saturn, that there are powerful people, powerful forces out there which are just preventing you from acting, especially in a social sense. So what is the point? You just might feel that you're just in a fundamentally disadvantaged position. But maybe you should focus instead on that Venus square Jupiter. That Venus square Jupiter, you've got Venus in Virgo, Jupiter in Gemini. That Venus square Jupiter could perhaps be useful. I think that it can give you a sense of optimism. And I know there's a lot to be negative about. It's a complicated day and you just might feel just overwhelmed by it. But that Venus square Jupiter could be about a fundamental optimism about who you are and what you're supposed to be doing. It's not about making any decisions. It's just a fundamental optimism that is there. And so what you have to do is you need to cut through all of the chaos and just hold on to where you're going. Think back, end of May, Jupiter went into Gemini, and Gemini is a high profile sector of your chart. It's about progress, and you need to remember that. And with Venus square Jupiter, Venus is a fortunate planet, Jupiter is a fortunate planet. Really hold on to that. Hold on to that vision about where you're going, and you might perhaps have forgotten some of the reasons why you took certain actions, and that might be why you descend into pessimism. But if you remember your logic, and you remember some of the hopes and aspirations of a few months ago, and you bring them back into focus, then I think that Virgo, you can cut a path through the weeds and or the brambles or the Himalayan blackberries, and you can cut a path forward. And if you stick to that path, I think, Virgo, you won't just be fine, but actually you'll start to make good progress, and these fears will eventually vanish. Libra. Today looks quite mixed. On one hand, we've got a full moon, and I think that this full moon could be quite good news, provided you handle it in the right way. So this full moon focuses on what makes you unique. At least it should be focusing on that. What makes you an absolute unique human being? What are the features and attributes that you have that just make you special? And then you have to ask, what is perhaps preventing you from reaching your full potential? I mean, maybe you're already reaching your full potential, but I suppose no one is entirely reaching their full potential. There's always a little bit further one could go. And it just may be Libra, that this full moon reminds you that perhaps you have been listening a little too much to other people. You've been trying not to rock the boat and to do what's expected of you, and you're perhaps now seeing that that approach is not ideal, and that you have to consider, what is right for you. And with this full moon, it starts to occur to you that there is a fundamental difference in priorities between you and certain other people. It may be not just other people, it may be just society at large, that you are different and you do have different views. And I understand that as a Libran, at some level you like to fit in, but there are limits to how much you can fit in. I mean, you are a human being, you are an individual, and it's important that your individual voice is actually heard, that people actually listen to what you're saying and respect you. And I think that this full moon actually allows you to do that. And this full moon is also square Uranus, and that square to Uranus may indicate certain hidden powers that you have, that you've maybe in the past haven't taken particularly seriously, but now you see your hidden powers, you start to understand your hidden powers, and now you can perhaps start to change the situation. So perhaps before you saw certain people, certain situations as being things which will limit you, will prevent you from which achieving what you want to do, but you also have to fit in. But now you can move beyond the whole thing, and perhaps, Libra, in the process, you can start being the one doing the influencing. And I think that that's very much something that you actually can do. It might not seem that way, but I think it really is the case. But you just have to take yourself seriously and make it clear that you are a serious person with a serious agenda. So don't be afraid of that. And it's absolutely not about fitting in. And sometimes you have to rock the boat a little. And while this is happening, we've got an opposition between Venus and Saturn. We've also got a square between Venus and Jupiter. And this square, Venus square Jupiter, Venus square Saturn, is somewhat complicated. Jupiter and Saturn making a square today, and Jupiter-Saturn is very much about stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. And so with Venus square Jupiter, Venus opposition Saturn, you just may feel that there are times in a day where you feel you can make progress, and then it all comes to a halt. So that's one way of looking at it. Alternatively, it may be about getting the balance right. So Venus square Jupiter, it's a somewhat indulgent aspect, and you would love to just do whatever you liked. You'd love to enjoy yourself. You'd love to enjoy the good things in life. That could be Venus square Jupiter. But Venus opposition Saturn, you just realize you have to deal with reality all the time. You have to face the truth. And so, even if you're when you're enjoying yourself, you feel that it's just temporary, that you can't really enjoy yourself because there's an obligation. And yet when you're doing something where you feel you have to do it, and it's all a bit boring and tedious, but you just have to do it and you have to do what you're told, then you're thinking about, it would be much better if you could just enjoy yourself. And so it's a kind of a difficult world where you can't really entirely relax, and you just have to perhaps accept the contradiction there. There is enjoyment and discipline, and they're messing each other up. And perhaps Venus, you you have to perhaps be realistic and understand your limitations. And I suppose if you have a realistic view of your limitations, of the limitations being placed upon you, not exaggerating the limitations, but not dismissing them, then it's perhaps going to be easier for you to relax. And perhaps you just have to be less of an extremist. You can't completely have fun all the way. You can't torture yourself with a heavily disciplined schedule. You can't do that. You perhaps have to find the middle path. And of course, that is what Libra is always trying to do. It's trying to find the middle path. And so that's maybe something that you need to concentrate on. But I do think with Venus opposition Saturn, you possibly shouldn't have too many expectations in terms of other people. You know, other people could slow you down. At the same time, other people may not be as forthcoming as you'd like them to be. So perhaps Libra in the social department, a bit of realism could actually be very useful. So it's a somewhat complicated day, but I think it's a day when you can certainly tune into the things that you're good at. I mean, you know, the moon is actually, at the beginning of the day, the moon is making a trine to Jupiter. Moon in Aquarius making a trine to Jupiter in Gemini, and of course Libra is another air sign. So it's kind of, Libra receives the trine from the moon, it receives the trine from Jupiter. And so if you can just focus on what you're good at and what you need to hold on to, and try to understand social pressure, and try to understand how social pressure might have been messing you up in the past. And if you can be an individual today, then I think in the end you'll be fine. Scorpio. So today there is certainly a lot going on, that's true. And I suppose some of today's events may have an impact on you. And I suppose it's just working out the best way forward. And interestingly, Mars, which is your ruler, is not immediately prominent. I know that Mars is quite close to a conjunction of Jupiter, and it's quite close to a square of Saturn, but Mars is one planet that isn't strongly aspected today. I mean, the moon does make a trine to Mars, but it's quite gentle, that trine to Mars. And so that might mean that there is a certain lack of obligation. There's perhaps nothing you have to do, nothing you have to respond to. But that doesn't mean that there aren't events that you should take into consideration. Now, the main event today is a full moon. And this full moon is across an important axis of your chart. I mean, you're a Scorpio and you're a fixed sign. And the sun is in Leo, which is a fixed sign. And the moon is opposition the sun, and the moon is, of course, in a fixed sign. And this full moon perhaps encourages you to consider what you're trying to achieve and what it might cost you to achieve what you want. So think about where you're going, where you'd like to be going, and the things that you're positive about, particularly things related to the society out there, where you're going in a public sense, and consider all of that. But also consider what is preventing you from moving in that direction. What have you been forgetting? And it seems that you have to consider the constraints upon you in order to really make progress. So if you try to make progress without even considering what might be holding you up, you might just think that it's just a question of you keep battering away and you'll eventually get where you want to go to. But it's not like that. The full moon is encouraging you to think about what is holding you up, and what other priorities you've perhaps been missing. And one priority that you really do have to consider is your home, perhaps, and your family. They have their demands, they have their needs. You can't ignore them. If you were to ignore them, you might at some level feel a bit destabilized. So stability does matter, because progress can only happen with stability. If there's no stability, then progress is impossible. And so in a way, the first priority is to stabilize things and to make sure that you're working on solid ground. And this sense of getting the balance right is confused by the fact that there's this full moon and it's square Uranus. So Uranus is square the sun, Uranus is square the moon, and you are aware of a disruptive force. And the question is, where does this disruptive force come from? And it just may feel that certain people and situations in your life are just making things really overly complicated. They're just preventing you from going from A to B. They're preventing you from feeling comfortable. And you have to look at where the disruption is coming from. And it's possible that you see this disruption as coming from another person or a group of people. That is a possibility, because Uranus is in Taurus, and Taurus is the opposite sign from Scorpio, so that is one source of disruption. But that Uranus might also be about your own inner disruptiveness. At some level, you might be sabotaging yourself. Perhaps at a conscious level, you are very sure where you want to go. But an unconscious level, you really do have a lot of doubts, and you are wondering whether this is really the right thing to go, it's the right place to go, and your doubts may be all over the place, and you might feel that it's just better to just stay where you are and not take risks. So that is possible. It's even possible that you might become aware how in the past you've been sabotaging yourself, and maybe that is how this full moon square Uranus is going to work, because Uranus can be the saboteur. And so perhaps if in the past you've been trying to do something and you haven't been succeeding, you might just get an insight today about how you haven't been succeeding, and why you haven't been succeeding, and you might just see your unconscious mind at work, because that's what the unconscious mind does. It does so often just sabotage us. It doesn't want something to happen, so it just creates a load of roadblocks. And so that's something, Scorpio, that you should consider. And I suppose it's quite a psychological concept, but Scorpio, you understand psychology, and I feel that perhaps I shouldn't be talking about it. Scorpios, I'm a Gemini, you're a Scorpio, and perhaps I'm sort of trivializing something that is very serious, that perhaps doesn't need to be talked about. So that's one aspect of what's happening today. And it also seems that you may be disrupted by, not disrupted, but you might just feel that certain other people just are unhelpful. There's an opposition between Venus and Saturn, and Venus, I think, very much does represent the people in your life. And the people in your life are just not going to be quite as helpful as they should be. And they might drag their feet and raise objections. And if sometimes you might feel you need advice. You ask someone for advice. You ask someone for their opinion, but their advice and their opinion may just be less than helpful. And so perhaps, Scorpio, that's just something you should just accept, and maybe you need to be focusing on yourself, and perhaps accept that right now there may not be much advice available. Though at the end of the day, things do change if you're in the Americas. So late afternoon, early evening, the moon does change sign. It moves from Aquarius into Pisces. And so Pisces is a water sign. Scorpio is a water sign. As the moon moves into Scorpio, the intensity of the full moon starts to break up, because the full moon was moon in Aquarius, plays sun in Leo. But when the moon moves out of Aquarius into Leo, the full moon loses its strength. And with the moon moving into Pisces, I think you start to have a greater perspective on yourself, and you feel more comfortable, and it's just going to be easier for you to relax. And so, yeah, if you're in the Americas, in the end, things will start to get much easier, certainly late afternoon, early evening. If you're in other parts of the world, okay, it might not be until tomorrow. If you're in the UK, if you're a Scorpio in the UK, then the moon the moon goes into Pisces just before midnight on Monday. I think 9 minutes to midnight. But, if you're further east, then over the course of the morning, the moon will, it's Tuesday, over the course of Tuesday morning, the moon will move into Pisces. And I think that will make things easier for you. But just today, Scorpio, there is quite a lot for you to consider, and I think it could actually be quite a psychological day. And I think that the person who understands your psychology best is you yourself. And I think that if you're aware of your own psychological processes, then I suppose in the end, today could actually be quite useful and even a little bit enlightening. Sagittarius. We do have to think about Jupiter, which is your ruler. And today, Sagittarius, Jupiter is under a certain amount of pressure, because you've got a square with Jupiter and Saturn, and I have been talking about this square between Jupiter and Saturn. It has been building up, and it just may be with this Jupiter square Saturn that you start to understand that some of the things that you've really taken for granted in your life, not just things that may be people, but some of the things that just you've taken for granted but just have become an important part of the scenery, are maybe holding you up, at least in their current form. You've just accepted that they're there, and you haven't asked questions, but they've been perhaps bringing you down, and they have prevented you from really fulfilling your full potential. So you have to ask yourself, what might some of these things be that are holding you up, that have been preventing you from really being yourself? Now, it might be that fundamentally you've been a little too fixed in your opinions. And I know that Sagittarius has got a reputation for being, wide-ranging, for being into freedom and being into movement. But we should never forget that Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter can be quite a moralizing force. and can have a set of principles which may be fairly immutable. And perhaps what's been happening is that you have been a little bit too stuck in your own fixed principles and philosophies, and you've reached a stage where to some extent they are starting to hold you up and are just preventing you from really being yourself. And they're also preventing you from really engaging with people as much as you could be. It is a time, Sagittarius, when certain other people do matter, when you need to consider what other people have to say, when you have to consider alternative views. But it's just that maybe you're just so stuck in your own set of views, your own opinions that you perhaps built up over a long time, that you're not able to avail yourself of the opportunities. So maybe, Sagittarius, with this Jupiter square Saturn, you're being encouraged to be more open-minded. You're maybe even being challenged to be more open-minded. And some of the ideas that you have taken for granted, you just perhaps have to accept that maybe they're just not as great as you thought they were. They may just be holding you back. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you have to abandon your principles or abandon your ideas. You just have to be a little bit more flexible and just consider the opportunity that there may be alternatives out there which might be better. And while all this is going on, Venus is opposition Saturn and Venus is square Jupiter. So Venus square Jupiter. Now, Venus square Jupiter could encourage you to be a little bit overindulgent, and perhaps your overindulgence may be a response to restriction. You feel that you're being held up in one place, so you try to exercise your freedom wherever you can, and that exercising your freedom might just be perhaps about spending money or buying things that you don't perhaps need, or perhaps you might feel you want to be a consumer. And if you feel a need to consume today, then I would perhaps ask yourself why you feel a need to consume. Maybe perhaps you're compensating for something, and you perhaps feel consumption is an act of freedom because you're responding to a restriction that you yourself are creating. So, Sagittarius, don't restrict yourself, because if you try to restrict yourself, and when I say restrict yourself, I'm more talking about restricting yourself in terms of concepts and ideas and philosophies. If you restrict yourself, then you might start to look for freedom elsewhere in a way that might not be very healthy, like the freedom to spend money, the freedom to drink too much, the freedom to eat too much. That just might be a response. And as I said, I don't think that is a particularly good idea. I don't think that would be healthy. Now, I'm sorry I've been a little bit negative, and I suppose I've been a bit too lecturing. That wasn't my plan. And who am I to lecture you? And of course, there is a fundamental clash, isn't there? I'm a Gemini, you're a Sagittarius. Perhaps we have a certain clash of opinion here. And I had a Sagittarian astrology teacher, Olivia Barclay, and she would. I remember she wrote a comment on my on one of my papers that I did. It was a correspondence course. That was the days before the internet. And she said to me, "You're only interested in arguments. I'm interested in the truth." And the truth is an important thing for every Sagittarian, and I think today is perhaps about the truth. And with today's full moon, you may be thinking about what is true. And, because the moon is in Aquarius, sun is in Leo, you really want to believe in certain things. You want to actually consider the truth. And that truth might be represented by the sun in Leo conjunct Mercury. That's what you're looking for. You want things to be uncomplicated. You want to be able to believe in something. Sagittarius, and as I've already indicated to you, I'm not comfortable with this idea that you should just focus on a fixed set of beliefs, particularly if they're rooted in the past. But that is the sun in Leo conjunct Mercury. In opposition, that sun in Leo conjunct Mercury is the moon in Aquarius. And perhaps the moon in Aquarius is the way forward. So Aquarius, from a Sagittarian perspective, is about perhaps the arguments. Aquarius is not Gemini, but it is about arguments, it's about the little facts, it's about the things that need to be considered, and you need to be able to focus on them. Don't be so into yourself that you ignore factual details that really matter. And these factual details could be surprising. When you actually start to put them together, you may have a sense of surprise when you see the bigger picture. And of course that relates to the fact that the sun and the moon are both making a square to Uranus, and so Uranus could be about a surprise. So you think that you've got everything sorted out, but when you actually force yourself to look at the details, to look at the facts, then everything comes together and you see a completely different picture. And I think that different picture could be just so helpful in terms of moving you on to the next stage, whatever that next stage might be. Capricorn. So, as we know, Capricorn, Saturn is your ruler, and Saturn's doing quite a lot of stuff today. We've got Jupiter square Saturn, and Venus is opposition Saturn. And so Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics. Venus is the lesser benefic. Jupiter is the greater benefic. And so how do you relate to the benefics? I think Capricorn, you may be tempted to take an overly critical and perhaps negative view. Perhaps, you can see that other people are trying to get things together. You can see that other people are trying to be optimistic. That is Venus square Jupiter. People are trying to make the best of perhaps a bad situation, but they're trying their hardest. And Capricorn, you could just be overly negative. That is Saturn opposition Venus, your squelching Venus. Saturn square Jupiter, likewise you're squelching Jupiter. So you have to get the balance right. So Venus square Jupiter may be about excessive indulgent behavior, people showing no discipline. And that's clearly something that Capricorn is not happy about, that Capricorn wants to actually respond to and bring people back in line. And that, I suppose, would be quite fortunate, would be the right behavior. On the other hand, if people are just trying to be happy, trying to be optimistic, and you have to work out how you respond, you have to be supportive. And perhaps what people are looking for is not criticism, or at least mindless criticism. They're looking for structure. And Capricorn, if you can be constructive, I think that is what you can do. I think that you can actually provide people with a firm sense of structure. And I think that they would very much appreciate it. So in that sense, Capricorn, you do have a certain sort of sense of responsibility, and you can help people, you can facilitate people as they try to work things out. And so that means that you're really a person who could be really good. You could be a good person to have around, but you could be a terrible person to have around. It kind of depends, doesn't it? So you have to think very hard about what impact you're having and whether you are having the right impact. So that's probably the main theme today. There is a full moon, and the full moon is square Uranus today, and people are going on and on about this full moon. The question is, to what extent does this full moon affect you? Are you directly impacted by it? I would have said the answer is probably no. I think that it's going to be more other people impacted by the full moon, other people realizing things, having to deal with surprise events, trying to make sense of a complicated world. That's more other people, and you're perhaps having to deal with the consequences of the full moon as experienced by others. I don't think you're going to have to necessarily feel the consequences of the full moon directly, but I think you understand, by and large, the basic energy of a full moon. It is a time when people are in a state of surprise, even shock, when things can happen. You understand it all, and I don't think you're going to be too fazed about it. So perhaps you can be the interpreter of this full moon, or maybe even, I hesitate to use this word, but you can be the person who moves people from one place to another. I don't want to say the ferryman or the ferrywoman, as in the car on the ferryman who takes people across the Styx in terms of Hades. It's not quite like that. Maybe there's this concept of the psychopomp. What's a psychopomp? It's like some kind of guide at a psychological level, and sort of you can perhaps guide people from one place to another. And I think that's actually it. You can be a very powerful guide, and if people are confused, you can guide people on their journey. But it's just so important that you don't impose your opinions on anyone, or you don't indulge in excessive criticism, because I think that would just not be particularly helpful. And overall, Capricorn, I just think you have to be very aware of the impact you have on other people, remembering that Venus is opposition Saturn. Venus is a universal significator of people, and so Saturn is you. So, in certain situations you could make people feel overly self-conscious, but it's not necessarily the case. It doesn't have to be the case. I'm just saying that it could be the case. And finally, just a quick word about career, if it's appropriate. I understand that career might not be appropriate for you, but if from a career perspective, or if you're happen to be looking for a job or anything like that, this Venus opposition Saturn may indicate that you become aware of perhaps a new issue or a new problem that perhaps you hadn't thought about before. And it may be a problem that's not immediately relevant, but it's going to be relevant soon. And you have this awareness, and it might be a little bit disconcerting, but this moment of awareness, when you just start to understand a couple of facts, something you just see, you have this moment of awareness, and you're perhaps then in a position to start to address it. It's perhaps a problem that really does need to be addressed, and you perhaps, Capricorn, can actually do something about it. See what is possible, and don't make assumptions about perhaps your own direction. Especially if you're working, there just might be something that needs to be worked through, and it could actually relate to the wider economy. Remembering that there is Jupiter today, we do have Jupiter square Saturn, and the Jupiter square Saturn is very relevant to the wider economy. And so with Venus opposition Saturn, Venus square Jupiter, perhaps Capricorns need to just consider how economic trends can affect your career and business, and perhaps you can just make some small changes and prepare yourself. And I think that might be a good thing to do. So don't entirely focus on other people and their problems. Consider what you need to do, and you need to do it not necessarily today, but it's something to consider over the next few days. Aquarius. There is a full moon in Aquarius, so it is a big event. Okay, there's a full moon in Aquarius every year. I suppose occasionally there are 2 full moons in Aquarius every in a year, but normally it's just one. And this full moon in Aquarius is, I think, likely to have a reasonably powerful impact upon you. I mean, after all, you've got the moon in Aquarius, which is in your sign, and it is opposition the sun in Leo, which is in your opposite sign. And of course, that full moon is squared by Uranus. So Aquarius, I think that you're going to very much be thinking about yourself and who you are and what you want to do and what is getting in your way. And with that full moon, you are becoming perhaps aware of what's holding you up. There has been a hold up, and it may be that there are things that you've been involved with that are no longer doing you any good. And with a full moon, it's very often a moment of truth. You can see things really for how they are. And when you see things for how they are, then I suppose there's a call for action, isn't there? You have to decide how are you going to respond. And it may have an impact on relationships, this full moon. You can see people, you can see into their souls, you can see what kind of people they are, you can see whether they're trusted, you can start to think about whether or not they're useful, and then you can make decisions. And the decisions you make as a result of this full moon could be actually quite sudden, very abrupt, and that is, of course, because the full moon is opposition Uranus. So Uranus may be quite disruptive. So if you do make decisions, consider how you're actually going to act on those decisions. I mean, you don't want to just do the first thing that comes to mind and not even think about it. That wouldn't suit you. You need to sort of take a bit of time to work things through. And you shouldn't forget that a full moon is not just something that lasts for one day. A full moon can last for at least a fortnight. So perhaps rather than thinking about today as just all being about Monday, you should be thinking about the time between today, which is the full moon on Monday, and the next new moon. So we've got a new moon on September the 2nd or 3rd. So beginning of September, we've got a new moon. So between now and the beginning of September, Aquarius, make a special effort to watch people. Look at how you interact with them. ask yourself how useful they are. Ask yourself whether they're actually playing a constructive role in your life. And then you might want to make appropriate changes. And it's not just in a negative sense. You might start to realize that a person who you hadn't regarded as being very important, they've just been very much on the periphery, is actually someone you really appreciate, that's someone you want to get closer to. And so, talking about relationships, this full moon could be important. As a result of this full moon, relationships can change. Perhaps they can peak. If it's a fairly short-lived relationship, this may be the peak. This may be the moment where you see, well, this is it. Or it may be that a relationship you're in undergoes a change. It might intensify, perhaps because you understand the truth of the matter. Perhaps you realize that you and someone else have got a lot of things in common and you're going to spend more time together. That might be another way how it works. But it's because this full moon is square Uranus, it just does have this disruptive edge to it. So certain relationships could change very fast, and as a result of this change, it could be disruptive to your entire sort of peace of mind. And that's why it's just a good idea to try to have a longer window, not just to think about today, Monday, perhaps to think about the next fortnight between now and early September. And perhaps you need to manage that change and not be over dramatic about it. And perhaps if you see that a big change is coming up, you perhaps need to prepare yourself for it, so that there's not massive sudden disruption happening on one day or in one 5-minute period. So that way you need to create a little bit of stability here. You don't want the planet Uranus to get out of control. So the full moon is certainly not something to be underestimated, and at the same time it's very important, Aquarius, that you give people space. Specifically today, people need space and they need understanding, and they don't need too much judgment. And people may see you in a sort of fairly judgmental role. They might see you as being someone who is judging them, even if you're in a sort of completely regular relationship. It might be not even a relationship, a friendship. You have interactions with other people. It may just feel that you're both on the same level, but actually the other person may regard you as being quite judgmental. They may even regard you as in some way as having a sort of a superior way of viewing the world. I mean, not that you necessarily do have a superior way of viewing the world, but someone is perhaps secretly looks up to you, even though it appears that you're on the same level. And I think you need to understand that and then weigh your words, and you must make sure that you don't judge people, or or at least that you're not seen to judge people, because you might actually have quite a strong impact if you're not careful. I mean, maybe it's a good thing to pronounce your judgment, to let people know about the mistakes they've made. I mean, that might be a good thing. That is absolutely possible. But if that is happening, at least you need to be aware of it. And if you're going to criticize someone, just make sure you do it with good cause. Pisces, your ruler is Jupiter. We do need to think about what is actually happening to Jupiter. because a couple of things are happening to Jupiter which may be of relevance to you. So Jupiter is square Saturn. I think I talked about that last time when I was talking about the position of the planets over the weekend. So Jupiter's square Saturn, and Venus is square Jupiter. So in fact, we have a T square, what we say in the jargon. So Venus is opposition Jupiter, and sorry, let me get it right. Venus is opposition Saturn, and Jupiter is square Venus, and Jupiter is square Saturn. So Jupiter has an important role to play today. So let's start with that Venus opposition Saturn. Venus opposition Saturn in itself is actually quite a difficult aspect. Venus is the planet of relationships, and Saturn is the planet of restriction. And so some of the people around you, maybe many of the people around you, just feel they can't express themselves. And at first sight, relationships just don't appear to be working very well, especially at an emotional level. There just isn't that emotional flow. I mean, there are emotions, but emotions are perhaps being trapped, and they're not flowing as much as they should be. So in the first instance, when you start to interact with other people, you might be really quite disappointed, and you may be wondering, why are people holding back on you? I mean, they may be holding back on you because it's may have something to do with you. There may be something about you that when people are around you, they perhaps don't feel that they can fully express themselves. So that is a possibility. But this Venus opposition Saturn is squared by Jupiter, and Jupiter is you. And it does seem that through your conscious effort, you can completely change the situation. So if at first you feel that everything is trapped, that there's no movement, there's no flow, then you are able to change the situation. And perhaps you have to ask yourself why there might be a lack of flow. And I think the reason might be because people are feeling insecure. A lot of people are feeling insecure. They don't know where their grounding is. They feel a long way from home. I mean, even if they have homes, they still feel a long way from home. I suppose that is a problem people have, isn't it? It's all about place attachment. There's a lot of stuff about the psychology of place attachment, how people get attached to a particular place, and that's very important for people's psychology. And I suppose what's happening, certainly in America, is that people are losing their place attachment. People move from one place to another, and they don't really feel connected with their community, and because they don't feel connected with their community, they feel that they can't express themselves, and you're perhaps dealing with people who just feel lost. And so because they feel lost, they are basically behaving in quite a defensive way. There's a certain insecurity there. And so Pisces, perhaps what you have to do is give people a sense of place, give people a sense of comfort and belonging. And so in any interaction you have today, your first job is to make people feel comfortable. Before you start talking about anything else, even if it's quite a trivial interaction, you need to make people feel comfortable. You need to make people feel that they belong somewhere. And once you can make people feel that they belong somewhere, then they're going to open up. So if you need to talk to someone or you want to talk to someone, that's your first job. And so I think, Pisces, in a sense, you can have quite a healing influence here. Because, there are a lot of wounded people out there. I'm not even talking about Chiron here. I'm talking about that Venus opposition Saturn, which to me represents some kind of wound. I mean, if you want to throw in Black Moon Lilith, Venus is actually conjunct. I mean, it's 4 degrees off, 3.5 degrees off Black Moon Lilith, if you want true Black Moon Lilith, if you want to throw that in. So that is something that you very much can do. And I know there's a full moon today, but actually, Pisces, I don't think the full moon is a big issue right now. Now, at the end of the day, if you're in the Americas, the moon actually moves into Pisces, late afternoon, early evening. The moon moves out of Aquarius and into Pisces. And I actually think that's nice. Although I don't think the full moon really has a great impact on you, all things being equal, I think it has even less of an impact on you when the moon moves into Pisces. Now, the moon might move into Pisces, will move into Pisces tomorrow for you if you're in Europe, Africa, Australia, Asia, New Zealand, so on. But if you're in the Americas, then this evening you just feel that things actually are starting to get easier, and you're better able to to be yourself, and perhaps some of the pressures regarding other people and them sort of holding back on things. It's going to be not so difficult, and it may actually be with the moon in moving into Pisces that you actually start to recover some of your sensitivity that you may feel that you've perhaps lost over the last couple of days. I mean, obviously Pisces is a very sensitive, emotionally aware sign, and perhaps you just may have lost a little bit recently, but with the moon coming back into Pisces, you do rediscover your sensitivity, and that should help relationships in quite a big way. And that's it for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching, and that's a kind of a bit of a relief because we've had this incredibly complicated situation astrologically, and it's just quite good perhaps just to put the astrology to one side and just have a different view. At least we hope it's a different view. Maybe it's not a different view. Maybe it's just going to tell us the same thing. Okay, so I asked the I Ching the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was number 23, splitting apart. Well, I mean, in a way, this does seem to reflect what's happening astrologically. We've got a full moon square Jupiter, square Uranus. And so full moon square Uranus, you do get a sense of things splitting apart, don't you? It does seem quite dramatic, this full moon. Sun and moon opposition each other, and now we've got this hexagram splitting apart. And at first sight, that sounds a bit grim. You are very aware at the moment that people don't get on with each other, that things are falling apart, perhaps, and there may be even a sense of this sort of creeping evil. Things are getting worse, things are getting more difficult. There is a sense of disintegration, there is a sense of uncertainty, and part of the image of this hexagram splitting apart is like a piece of furniture. It's like a table or perhaps a couch. That's what the I Ching likes to describe it as a couch. And things are eating away at it. I mean, I suppose you could imagine like termites are eating away at the legs, and they just keep eating away, and then the couch gets destroyed, and then the person sitting on the couch gets destroyed. And that's one of the images of splitting apart. And we have quite a lot of moving lines here. the bottom two lines both move. And it's perhaps indicating, like, to begin with, there's not a great deal we can do to begin with. And we perhaps need to keep a low profile. We can't do much because the inferior elements are on the rise. And then the second line moves, and it's just telling us that this sort of splitting process is getting worse, and we just shouldn't persist in something that actually isn't working. And then we get the fourth and the fifth lines moving, and this is a change, particularly the fifth line. The fifth line is talking about some kind of transition, and it's indicating that people who used to be a problem, or things that used to be a problem, are in a process of change, that they are perhaps seeing the light. Perhaps they've finally understood you. And so what used to be uncontrollable, what used to be an uncontrollable destructive force at the beginning of the movement, perhaps at the beginning of the day, is starting to change its mind. It's starting to see an alternative view. And so the indication might be that if you're dealing with people or events that seem to be completely unhelpful, that seem to be bringing you down, that you can in some way, through the strength of your personality perhaps, change them. And so what used to be a force for bad can actually become a force for good. What used to be hindering you can actually help you. And so perhaps the message from this hexagram of splitting apart is, yes, for sure, understand how things and people can damage you, but also be open-minded. If you give people a chance, if you're patient without making yourself vulnerable, then in the end you can actually transform the situation very much in your favour. Now this hexagram splitting apart does move because we've got 4 moving lines, and it's not surprising we've got 4 moving lines, is it? That's a lot of lines to be moving in a hexagram. I suppose it could be 6, but 4 is quite a lot. And that is a reminder that it's a busy day. Astrologically, there's a lot happening. And so this splitting apart does move. And just remember, it's not just that astrologically that's a lot happening. A lot is happening down here on planet Earth. And this is reflected by this hexagram with 4 moving lines. It's also reflected by the astrological picture, as they say, as above, so below. That is not the Hermetic doctrine, that what's happening up there and what's happening down there, they absolutely reflect each other. And the I Ching is also reflecting this. And so splitting apart does move, and it moves to hexagram number 10, which is treading. Treading relates to the tiger. We mustn't tread on the tiger's tail. We have to be very careful how we move. And the implication here is that the tiger, he looks scary. So you imagine the tiger sitting there, maybe in your house or your apartment. You've got this, you've got this tiger just lying there sleeping. As you walk around, you mustn't tread on the tiger. But you might tread on the tiger. It can happen. And even if a tiger bites you, it's not the end of the world. At least that's what the I Ching is telling us. It's not going to kill us. So in the previous hexagram, splitting apart, we're certainly dealing with a very delicate and dangerous situation where there's great forces of disintegration. But now with the tiger, we're still dealing with a difficult situation, but it's a situation where we have to advance. We have to put one foot forward. And in the process of putting one foot forward, there's always a danger that we wake the tiger up. But we have to go forward. We have to be careful. We have to start to make progress. But we're aware of the danger. And because we're aware of the danger, because we're aware of the challenge ahead, we should be able to manage it. And that tiger, it might seem dangerous, but it's fundamentally a neutral force. It may even be slightly beneficial. It doesn't take us so seriously that it wants to kill us. No, it doesn't. It will look beyond the occasional transgression. If, for example, we step on its tail, if we make a mistake, and I think we might make mistakes if we try to get past this, the previous situation of splitting apart, as we try to make progress. But we have to make progress. It's not enough to stay still. We will make the occasional mistake, but it's going to be okay. Even if the tiger bites us, that bite is not going to kill us. And so the tiger is representing the progress that we have to make, but we have to be very careful about it. So, having done the I Ching, I want to look at the full moon and I suppose in general about what's happening today, and look at this full moon in detail and to sort of ask, what is this full moon about? And so turning to the full moon. So let's just start by looking at a chart of the full moon. So here's the full moon. So this is August the 19th, 2024. I've set this full moon for Chicago. Why not? You've got the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. So August the 19th, 2024, Chicago time, it's 7:26 p.m. So when you evaluate a full moon, you need to look at the aspects it makes. Now this full moon is square Uranus. You can see that it's exactly square Uranus. Sun is at 27:15 Leo, and Uranus is at 27:11 Taurus, and there's a moon at 27:15 Aquarius. So full moons in general are about crisis points, but it's about when the lunation cycle goes into crisis. And this new moon is at the new moon, the previous new moon. Well, we had, when was the previous new moon? That was at the beginning of August. So that was we had a new moon on August the 4th at 12:34. That's when the cycle started, and now the cycle has gone into crisis. We can, and I don't necessarily mean crisis in a bad sense, but we see the whole picture. The moon is transforming from being a waxing moon, a growing moon, into a waning moon, a fading moon. And the full moon that you see in the sky is no longer at maximum. It's now starting to decline. And that is why full moons tend to be seen as being less fortunate for new moons, because it's past peak. And the full moons can be a moment where we see the truth. The truth is right in front of us. The moon is full. Whether or not we actually avail ourselves of the truth is another matter. Now, this full moon is square Uranus and it's conjunct Mercury. So it has a very Mercury-Uranus feel to it. And so this means that over the next 2 weeks, because I think this is a minimum period that a full moon is going to last for, is 2 weeks until the following new moon, which is on I think September the 2nd or 3rd. So this full moon is abrupt, it's action-packed, things can happen. Things can happen that we weren't expecting. Hence, full moon square Uranus. It's perhaps not a time for making finite plans, because those plans might have to be changed at very short notice. And there is also an excitement to this full moon because the full moon is conjunct Mercury, or the Sun is conjunct Mercury, the Moon is opposition Mercury, and of course Mercury is square Uranus. So there is a mental excitement, there's a mental agitation here, and of course right at the beginning of the full moon is when when the full moon actually is exact, we might expect this to be when we see the sort of maximum impact, and of course this full moon takes place just as the Democratic National Convention is forming the Democratic National Convention is starting in Chicago on Monday, and yeah, this is a very dramatic picture, and this is not a good time to start the Democratic National Convention. And yeah, it is square Uranus. And then you have to also consider, when you've got a full moon, what else is happening at the same time as the full moon. Well, at the same time as the full moon, we have Jupiter square Saturn and Venus. So Venus is opposition Saturn and Venus is square Uranus. So that aspect is sort of hardwired into the full moon. So we've actually got two T squares. We've got a T square involving the full moon and Uranus, and then we've got another T square involving Venus opposition Saturn with Jupiter on the T. So it's quite rare to have two close T squares on the same day, and which represent two sort of completely different things. And I think that the Jupiter-Saturn square, I would have said that this Jupiter-Saturn square does have some connection with the economy. I've talked about the Jupiter-Saturn cycle in some detail. Jupiter is about expansion, Saturn is about contraction. So when you've got Venus hitting that Jupiter-Saturn square, plus it's happening at the full moon, it may somehow today is some kind of economic turning point or some sort of crisis point, and it's difficult to know how it's going to, for example, impact the markets. I mean, logically you'd expect this full moon to have an impact on the markets. Now at the moment, like, everything seems to be going up. Because everyone's expecting interest rates to be cut at the beginning of September, and of course we've got Jackson Hole, which is this economic meeting of the great and the good in the economics world, and I suppose chairman of the Federal Reserve will be there, and others, perhaps central bankers. I don't know what the guest list is for Jackson Hole, but it is coming around the time of this Jupiter-Saturn square. So this is a time of, I would have said, economic dislocation, when something happens in the business cycle, when everything that's started since 2000, which is, you had COVID, and of course you've had the economic impact of Ukraine and inflation, and so it is coming together, and there may just be events around the time of this full moon today, remembering Jupiter-Saturn is square, but there is this Jupiter-Saturn square which very much connect with the economy, with things like interest rates, the markets. I don't want to make any forecasts about what I think the markets are going to do, because, just a reminder, this is not a financial channel, but it should be market relevant, this full moon, I think. And I'm not, as I said, I'm not going to make any predictions about it, but we will see what the markets are doing. Of course, by the time you watch this video, because I'm recording this video on a Sunday when the markets are closed, so by the time you watch this video perhaps on Monday after the markets have opened, you might start to see how things are working out. But one point I should make, which I made right at the beginning of this video, is that when we have some huge astrological event, which we get really excited about, it's not just a full moon, just so many things going on today. As luck would have it, probably absolutely nothing will happen. It will be a damp squib, and it would just be very disappointing, and we'll just go home. That reminds me of that book, When Prophecy Fails, or was it When Prophecy Failed, by Leon Festinger. So Leon Festinger was one of the people who discovered the theory of cognitive dissonance. And so When Prophecy Failed was these psychologists in the 50s. They investigated a group in Middle America who believed that the aliens were going to arrive on a particular day, and they were absolutely sure of it. They'd made plans. I think they'd even made financial arrangements. They'd got it all worked out, and they were getting ready. It wasn't just going to happen, sometime on that day. It was actually going to happen at a particular moment. And they were all getting ready, excited, and nothing happened. With cognitive dissonance, they tried to work out why that didn't happen. They thought, well, we were praying very hard, and that's probably why nothing happened. So when I'm talking about this full moon and all the big events we might expect, we just have to remember that book by Festinger and someone else, I can't remember the name, and others, When Prophecy Failed. We can get really excited about something, and then nothing happens. Now, as far as where this full moon is likely to have maximum impact, I've set this chart for Chicago. So if you set the thing for Chicago, you see that, Uranus is in the 7th. It's true. Moon is square Uranus. So with Uranus in the 7th, perhaps we might expect fireworks in Chicago, but Uranus is not actually exactly on the 7th house cusp. It's not completely there. So I wouldn't have said that it was necessarily super dramatic for Chicago. I think, though, as there is a Democratic National Convention taking place in Chicago, and I know that I know supporters of Palestine are converging on Chicago, but you have to also remember that the organisers of the Democratic National Convention are not stupid, and they will be doing everything they can to stop something happening. It's been very anticipated. People are thinking about a repeat of 1968, but I would be very surprised if nothing out of the ordinary happened in Chicago. You would have expected something out of the ordinary to happen, but again, maybe it's just been over-anticipated. And again, it may be a situation of when prophecy fails. Now, I do want to make a point about Kamala Harris, and she is. It depends who you believe. If you believe mainstream media, they're saying she's riding high in the polls. I've seen other reports. I think sort of Rasmussen suggesting that this is actually a myth, that maybe Democratic voters are oversampled, and actually she's not riding high in the polls at all, and it's just a myth. But let's just assume the mainstream media are right, and that she is riding high in the polls, that certain southern states are now coming into play, that maybe it looks as if she's heading for a landslide. Again, I'm not saying this is the case. The Democratic Convention is going to be important simply because it's on a full moon square Uranus. The full moon square Uranus can be about a change in the narrative. It can just be a change in direction. People suddenly seeing things in a different way. And if you want Kamala Harris to lose the election, you would very much expect the direction of the polls to start to change now with this full moon, because the full moon is about a change of direction. It can be a moment of crisis. And of course it coincides with the Democratic National Convention. So I think between now and the new moon, September the 2nd and the 3rd, probably a good idea to look very closely at the polls and to look at Kamala Harris and see what's going on, to see if there is a change. And of course, we don't know what events are going to be at the Democratic National Convention, but don't forget the Democrats aren't stupid, that they want to win the election, and I'm sure they're doing everything they can, and that includes perhaps manipulating the economic cycle. Rate cuts. Why do you have rate cuts? You have rate cuts to stimulate the economy. You do what you can in the run-up to the election to provide a picture that everything is fine economically. So they're trying everything they can, but still, this full moon may disturb the narrative. Now, if the narrative is not disturbed, if this full moon just is a blank, then if you're a Republican or a Trump supporter, that might be of some concern. So it's I think quite important that there is a change when this happens, that something switches over. Now I'm going to come back to US politics, but I just wanted to look at the astrocartography for the full moon. So let's look at the map, so the astro. We'll start by looking at a map of the world, and I know you can't see the whole world, but you can see. But let's okay. So let's just see where these lines are. So you can see this line here. You can see we have got. This is all the points where the sun is on the midheaven and the moon is on the IC. And so this may be a line of major activity here. Places that could be impacted by this. You can see that Uranus is opposition. Uranus is on the descendant, and at some place in like Central America, we might want to look at Central America, Mexico City for some impact of this full moon. That is a place where there could be an impact here. And then you've got, we should also consider New York, because New York has Venus on the midheaven, so that might, Venus opposition Saturn. So I'll be looking at New York in detail, and we've got some activity here in my South American geography isn't too good. There's Venezuela, but it's more, in Colombia, Ecuador, Peru. That's perhaps an area where the full moon could have a particular impact. So that's a part of the world we certainly shouldn't be ignoring. Now, somewhere else would be Europe. So Europe, I suppose I'm afraid I'm a little bit Eurocentric in my readings, but Europe is always somewhere where things can happen. So let's just have a look at Europe and this full moon. So turning to Western Europe, you can see that the full moon is across the ascendant in this arc. You see this yellow line here. It's going to be across the ascendant in Algeria. It's in southern France, in Switzerland, and goes through into Scandinavia. So we might see some stuff going on a certain amount of tension here in sort of Berlin, Copenhagen, perhaps. So Copenhagen might be somewhere to look for in terms of action. And so I'm not saying that anything is going to happen, but it's just somewhere to consider. Now let's just look at some relocated charts. Now I looked at here's a relocated chart for Mexico City. So I've taken the full moon, the August the 19th, and I've relocated it to Mexico City to see if anything is going on. The moon is the full moon is across the midheaven as I see of Mexico, and Uranus is of Mexico City, and Uranus is on the descendant. So I think that we might see over the next couple of weeks in Mexico, perhaps parts of Central America, we might see the full moon starting to make its impact felt. Of course, we've got a new president in Mexico. What's her name? I think it's Claudia. Is it Claudia Scheinbaum? Isn't it? I'll look at her chart in a moment. So Mexico is potentially impacted by this, and in terms of Mexico's president, I suppose, Claudia Scheinbaum. Claudia Scheinbaum was born on June the 24th, 1962. And so, yes, so if you look at Claudia Scheinbaum's chart, she's the president of Mexico. And she has got her Uranus at 2732 Leo. So that means that this full moon is hitting Claudia Scheinbaum's Uranus. And I know you could say, well, it's Uranus, it's a transpersonal planet. For ordinary people, it's not important. But she's not an ordinary person. She's president of Mexico. It's the same sense that, yesterday I talked about the horoscope of Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister. So she has Uranus conjunct Venus in Scorpio at around 25, 26, or was it late 20s, something like that, Scorpio. And so that's going to impact, it's likely to impact Annalena Baerbock. So with Mexico, we've got the Mexican president being impacted by the full moon through her Uranus, and we've got, in terms of astrocartography, we've got a fair amount of activity in Mexico. So perhaps Mexico is a place that we need to look at. And then there's New York. So New York, I suppose New York is a financial hub, isn't it? Wall Street. Venus is connected with money, and Venus is conjunct the midheaven. You've got Venus conjunct Black Moon Lilith on the midheaven, and you've got Saturn on the IC. So it may be that full moon, in terms of how it impacts New York or Wall Street, there may be a certain negative impact here. People are very enthusiastic about the markets at the moment. If you read what people are saying right now, people are incredibly bullish. They think, because they're just seeing interest rates are going up, everything's going to be fine, but we still have this full moon. Again, I must always emphasize, I'm not providing any financial advice. It's just an observation. Now, in terms of people, one other chart I want to look at. I did have a commenter, I think from India, who was perhaps saying that I should make some effort to look at the Indian horoscope, and I'm not going to look at the Indian horoscope, but I'm going to. Well, okay, here's the Indian horoscope. If you're interested in here, I just wanted to check to see if the full moon hits India. I mean, India is a big country, and so we always need to see as anything immediately impacting India. Yes, it's true, India has a lot of stuff in Leo, but it doesn't have anything around 25 Leo, and it doesn't have anything at sort of 19 mutable. So the two T-squares today don't seem to impact India. And that's not to say nothing is going to happen, but India, in that sense, it doesn't impact India's August the 15th horoscope. On the other hand, if you take the full moon and you relocate it to Mumbai, which is what they used to call Bombay, but it's now Mumbai. So if you relocate the full moon to Bombay, Mumbai as it used to be. In fact, this program seems easier to call it Bombay. My apologies for setting it for Bombay rather than Mumbai, but they're the same thing. So this is the full moon when you set it for Mumbai, which, okay, Mumbai may not be the capital of India, but it is the commercial centre of the country. And this, for Mumbai, there is Uranus exactly on the ascendant. And I suppose you could say that, we saw with New York, Venus is actually on the midheaven. Venus opposition Saturn was on the midheaven set for New York. But Mumbai is, of course, the financial capital of India. It's where the markets are run, where the Indian stock exchange is centered. And so we do see Uranus exactly on the ascendant. So there's the ascendant for Mumbai, 2713 Taurus, and the moon is exactly on that. So I think that this may be a part of the world that we need to be looking at. Now, that may say something about the Indian markets, may say something about the global markets, because India is an increasingly powerful player. And you actually have a strip going all along western India where Uranus, it follows actually the Indian coast from what's sort of Damien and Dew in the sort of top of the west coast down to the tip of Kerala. You can see that this full moon is having a big impact on Western India, not the capital. So it's probably not about anything directly impacting the government of Modi, but more about India in general and perhaps the Indian markets. So having looked at some countries, I want to look at some people who might be impacted by the full moon. And I was just talking about Kamala Harris, so I suppose I should look at Kamala Harris again. Now, the full moon itself doesn't impact Kamala Harris. But remember, Venus is opposition Saturn at the moment. And so, in other words, at the moment she's got Saturn opposition her Venus, and so she's got her sort of Venus return. And so her Venus is under a lot of pressure. And, I mentioned this in a previous video. We had that Mars-Saturn square last week. And that Mars-Saturn square was hitting Kamala's Venus. And so this one is, her Venus is still being hit. And Venus represents her, it represents her relationships, it's how she gets on with people, and I suppose we might be seeing things behind closed doors here. I mean, she has a reputation for being a very difficult person to deal with, she's a very difficult person to work with, and I think that this might be emphasized by the fact that Saturn is opposition her Venus and is conjunct her Venus, but it's happening at the time of the Democrat National Convention. So you imagine she's at the Democrat National Convention, and how is she going to feel? Well, I suppose when I say that the full moon doesn't hit her, that may not be entirely true, because if you look at it, she has got Saturn at 28 Aquarius. So in fact, the full moon does pick up on her Saturn to an extent, and she does have this wide T-square, Saturn opposition Mars square Jupiter. So she may be impacted by this, by the full moon itself may pick up on her Saturn, but the Saturn is also opposition her Venus. So I'm thinking, in terms of how is she going to feel after the convention or during a convention? Is she going to be feeling, oh, this is working well, this is working badly, or whatever? I think overall, I don't get the sense that she's going to feel particularly comfortable at the convention. And, you've got Mars starting to move towards a conjunction of her ascendant. I'm not convinced that it's going to be great. I don't think I can say that it's going to be a disaster, but I think it'll be clear that she is a difficult person to deal with, and I think that there may be some mistakes here. So I don't think that it's going to be a great time, a great event for her. Now, while this is going on, she does have to think about her opponents, and of course, we're talking about Trump and Vance. So here is Donald Trump's chart. And of course, Donald Trump is really affected by this full moon in quite a big way, because this full moon directly hits his Mars. I mean, he's going to have Sun conjunct his Mars. He's going to have Moon opposition his Mars. He's going to have Uranus square his Mars. And so he really gets it with this full moon. Plus he's got Saturn conjunct his Saturn square his Uranus. So from a transit point of view, this is quite a difficult time for him. And I think he needs to make an effort to really restrain any impulsivity he might have. And and also full moon hitting quite close to his Mars, he needs to continue to watch his safety. It's certainly not on a level of what was going on in the middle of July when there was that Mars-Uranus conjunction or an algol hitting him, but I don't think it's quite that bad. But still, I do think he has to watch out for his personal safety. I'm not saying anything bad's going to happen this time round. I mean, his security must be rock solid at this stage. And also he must be careful about blurting things out. The things he says, it does matter. And that Mars in Trump's chart at 26 Leo does connect with his vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance's ascendant. So there's J.D. Vance's chart. And so J.D. Vance has 27 Leo rising. So this full moon hits J.D. Vance. So it hits both of them. It hits a ticket. And it actually hits an important point of connection between J.D. Vance and Trump, because Trump's Mars is on J.D. Vance's ascendant. And so the full moon and Uranus will be hitting a major point of connection between J.D. Vance and Trump. It may be that over the next couple of weeks, J.D. Vance and Trump have perhaps some disagreements about strategy. And I think the two men could, in their own ways, be under a certain amount of pressure. But maybe this full moon is not about, for J.D. Vance's perspective, is going to really push J.D. Vance to do something perhaps quite extreme. I think he will get noticed. I think with that, I mean, how can he not get noticed? There's a full moon across his ascendant, square Uranus, and Uranus is right close to his midheaven. I think that we'll be hearing a lot from J.D. Vance in the next couple of weeks, and he may be saying things which maybe sound quite outrageous and extreme. But is it going to be good or bad for Trump? I think Trump and Vance have to be really very careful with this lunation. And it is such a critical time, isn't it? Really critical time. between now and a new moon, we really would expect the poles for Camera to start to come off their peak, if indeed Trump is going to win in November. We really need to watch that, because that was my view. This is kind of make or break, perhaps, the next couple of weeks for the campaign, for both sides maybe, but I suppose a lot of it is connected with how the Democratic National Convention works its way through. Now, one other chart I wanted to look at, I was asked about Justin Trudeau. And so Justin Trudeau does not escape the full moon. Justin Trudeau, this is his chart, got a nicely timed chart. Justin Trudeau has his midheaven at 2717 Taurus. So that means that he has Uranus exactly on his midheaven. And so that means the full moon hits his midheaven big time. And so in terms of Canada, what Justin Trudeau is doing, there may be some surprises, some events that Justin Trudeau has to respond to. And so he's certainly someone to watch over the next couple of weeks. And just remember, Justin Trudeau has his Mars at 2935 Pisces, so Neptune is still quite close to the conjunction of his Mars. So yeah, Trudeau does have to be a little careful, I think. And other leaders, well, I suppose Benjamin Netanyahu, just a reminder, Benjamin Netanyahu has his Mars at 2645 Leo. So the full moon is right on Benjamin Netanyahu's Mars, and Uranus is therefore square Benjamin Netanyahu's Mars. So in terms of the Middle East and Benjamin Netanyahu's behavior, we can expect, I think, his Mars to be very activated, and it'll be interesting to see how he responds to whatever provocations there are. And I suppose there is this argument that Benjamin Netanyahu is hell-bent on Trump winning in November. And so maybe he might take the view that if he can stir things up, that might help Trump win. I don't know, just do something. The Iranians are on edge. And so, yeah, so he's going to be tempted, I think, to really push things with his Mars being hit by the full moon. And one final chart. No, I keep going. There are so many charts to look at. We should not. I want to look at the chart of two countries. One chart I want to look at is the chart of the United States. Just a reminder that if the United States really was born at 5:10 in the evening on July the 4th, 1776, this is a chart that astrologers like to use, then the United States has an exact opposition between the moon in Aquarius and true black moon Lilith in Leo. So there's an exact moon, black moon, Lilith opposition here. So that's the moon. What is the moon? Moon might be the American people. And so this full moon is hitting the United States' moon, and Uranus is hitting the United States' moon. So there might be something in terms of the United States with this full moon that is incredible. It is destabilizing, and the people might be restless. And who knows, are the people going to be restless in Chicago? I suppose that's possible, but you know, I suppose you could talk about that civil unrest. You don't really get civil unrest in the US in the same way as you do in other countries, but I think that this, from in terms of hitting the moon, I think that we really have to be looking at how America responds to this full moon square Uranus hitting its natal moon. And finally, there's our favorite country, Ukraine. We have a fairly good time for Ukraine. Ukraine has a Mercury-Venus conjunction in its chart. Mercury at 26 Leo, Venus at 28 Leo. So the full moon is hitting its Mercury-Venus conjunction. I mean, the Mercury-Venus conjunction, it's a lot of it, of course, is about PR. Everything is about PR in Ukraine, and Mercury in Ukraine's chart. Mercury is aspecting the Sun Moon midpoint. Venus is aspecting the Mars Saturn midpoint, and so this full moon may impact the way Ukraine presents itself and its PR machine. You know, for example, claiming that the Kursk offensive is going incredibly well. The evidence suggests it's maybe not actually going quite so well, but it's really peaked, and at some stage they may have to withdraw. But still, the PR machine has to keep going, and I suppose maybe the full moon hitting Ukraine's Mercury, there is that tension there. You've got facts, you've got reality, and then you've got the PR machine, Mercury. And so the full moon is the truth of the matter in Russia, but in Ukraine, the truth of the matter in Kursk. And then you've got Ukraine, which has to keep on churning out stories. The mainstream media is completely fueled by Ukraine, by news reports coming from the Ukrainian official channels. That's one of the reasons why we don't really know what's going on in Ukraine. But there may be a bit of a challenge there in terms of how Ukraine deals with reality, with that full moon hitting its Mercury. Oh, one small point. Venus, Ukraine's Venus is opposition Kamala's Saturn. Maybe Kamala is not going to be quite as enthusiastic about continuing with the Ukraine war if she were to get elected, as some people are claiming. Maybe she just finds Ukraine, I don't know, maybe she's not as interested in it as she appears to be, and her Saturn is hitting Ukraine's Venus. So, and Venus is, of course, on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So Kamala's Saturn doesn't really sit well with Ukraine's chart. But that's just a point anyway. It may be of no importance. It may all be moot by the time we get to the presidential elections. Okay, those are all my statements about the full moon. I'm sorry, it was all a bit chaotic. I think there was a lot to be said, but maybe I should have made a better effort to try to kind of theme the thing. But no doubt, on paper, it's this full moon, square Uranus, and all the other stuff going on, Venus opposition Saturn, with Jupiter on the T. It should, in theory, be a big day, but maybe it's just over-anticipated. And though we should also remember, full moon is not just about one day, it is about at least the following 2 weeks, and maybe even the following month. Okay, so thank you very much for hearing me out. If you enjoyed the video, I would of course be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, but does make a big difference to the channel. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.